welcome to Forever Founders. We have the co-founders, myself, Jackie Aina, and Dennis Asamoah, co-founders of Forever Mood. So occasionally we like to just get in the weeds with other co-founders, and not only in the home fragrance category. We kind of just like to talk to other founders from different categories, different genres, different parts of the beauty space. And today we have the co-owner and co-founder. Actually, I may need you to clarify because I don't know if some of the structures in your business has changed, but Olamide started Topicals, which really focuses on skincare with an emphasis on, hyper performance products, emphasizing on people of darker skin, people of darker complexions, which have their own subset of issues in itself. And I would know because I experienced them. But Olamide, I would love to hear more about your story, how you started the brand, which is why I mentioned earlier, because I know you started with a co-founder. And just for clarity, is that still a part of the structure of the brand today? Or can you kind of give us an intro to yourself and the state of where you are today with Topicals?
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I am the founder now of Topicals. I no longer have a co-founder. She hasn't been with the business since about probably the first 4 to 6 months of when we launched on the market. I think I have had a really interesting time building this business. I think it's really, really difficult. Dennis and I were actually talking a little bit earlier and talking about how there's so many things that look so fun about starting a business, whether it's like managing a team or co-founder relationship. There's just so much that goes into building a business. And so I'm really excited to be chatting with y'all today. It's been a wild ride, let's just say that.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Especially with skin. Like skincare is expensive, which is why I made it a point to call out high performing, innovative. Like you're not just making like moisturizers, like you're making products that are treating things and are, like I said, high performance. And that costs money to innovate. And some of these ingredients, like they cost money to find and get access to. So you want to start us off with the first question?
Yeah, I think my first question is like, when you first started, what was kind of your main responsibility? Because as you know, as a founder, you have multiple hats, and you may have started with your co-founder as doing this role and you realize, you know what, maybe this is my strength, or maybe this, because I've even in the past have, and I don't know your situation, by the way, and I don't want to speak without knowing the details, but I've started businesses with a co-founder in the past, and sometimes things don't go as well, or we realize maybe we're not a good fit and we have to move apart, and it's like, hey, I wish you the best, and you keep it moving. Do you want to give us some context as to like maybe what you were predominantly starting with and how it evolved and how you did, then you decided, I'm just going to move forward and run the business as I need to?
Yeah, of course. My co-founder is absolutely brilliant. Like one of the best in the business, I think, when it comes to science and just understanding how to create product, thinking about the science of product. She had spent years working at Stanford as a technology intern. So she was someone who really understood product. And in the beginning, that was her role, was to really design products, think about the science, think about the way we communicate that to our community. My role was on the CEO side to fundraise us some money, making sure we had the resources to actually execute on what we want. Retail, I focused a lot on getting us into a retail early on. We split the responsibility of like creative and branding in the early days to really get the vision and the message down. But I would say I was more of like the business side, side.
The day-to-day operator of business. Okay, cool.
That's still a lot of hats to wear, though.
Yeah.
It is. It's
still a lot of hats to wear.
Yeah. And I think with having a co-founder, I think that having a co-founder can be really good because I think people can divide and conquer. I think sometimes what gets really difficult is, again, people understanding what it means to undertake being a founder. Like, it is not an easy thing. It requires a lot out of you. And I think that that's the biggest thing I've even learned is, would I be doing what I was doing right now if I knew everything that I felt into? Like, people want to be the boss, but I don't know if I recommend it. Like, I think it's fun. I think it's something that you learn a lot about yourself with. But again, it's something that you have to, I tell my team all the time, death to your ego every day. And I have to remind myself of that as well. It's just like, you're humbled every single day. There's something you've done wrong. There's something you need to fix. There's something that's broken. And I would say for someone who has never experienced what being a founder is like, it can be extremely overwhelming. And just not everyone wants to continue doing so.
Yeah, that's for sure a very good point. And just to add to that, is there anything that you would like to share in your early days where you're like, oh my God, I wish someone told me this before I started it? Obviously, you've gone through it and it's made you stronger, but you're like, wow, okay, I didn't expect this.
Perfectionism. I think I have been trying to put into words what I've learned about perfectionism, but it's a little bit difficult. But I think this idea of perfectionism is just comparison dressed up as like hard work, right? Or dressed up as like attention to detail. Because perfectionism really is you're trying to make something look, feel, appear as something that you've seen before. But perfection doesn't exist because you create every day what you think perfection is. You know, my mom always says, whatever's worth doing is worth doing well. Well is subjective. You know, well to you may be different to me. And I think that's the beauty in the human experience. But I think so many of us get bogged down, myself included, in the beginning on wanting it to be perfect, wanting every little thing to just hit exactly how I wanted to. And it's funny because a lot of people don't know this, but I wanted to scrap the whole branding of Topicals, packaging wise, when we were going to launch. I was like, this is actually not that good.
You wanted to just scrap, even though you spent money, everything was ready to go.
I wanted to. And a lot of people were like, no, it's good. But what it was is that, you know, ointments had never looked the way I was trying to make them look, right? And so when I was comparing myself across what was in the industry, and then I was comparing myself to other brands that I looked up to, my brand didn't fit there. And it's funny to look back now because that is why people love us. But at the time, for me, I didn't look like everyone else. And so I was like, okay, we need to change it.
I love that example because, sorry to be based, but the very good point is that even your names, faded, and the butter is like the culture. The culture.
Yeah, they're like literal.
And it stands out. And funny enough, without even, if I was not know who you were, I would like a black woman.
You'd be drawn to
a black person made that.
The language kind of simplifies it in a way, like, and it's like I said, they're quite literal names. Like, I know what that means, you know, like, and it faded, like, yeah, that's quite literal. That's what I'm looking for. But I really want to point out what you said about perfectionism, because this is actually a term that, like, I think as a brand founder and also like as the somewhat of the face of Forever Mood, people see this idea of me being a perfectionist, and I rebuke the term because, to your point, I think it's more important. Like, I honor words like detail oriented, or, you know, just really putting in the work to craft something as opposed to hiding behind the facade of perfectionism, because I think perfectionism is a facade that sometimes we get trapped up in, which you said is really comparison. And honestly, I think it's a little bit of like just hyper critiquing for the sake of it sometimes. Like, sometimes we just perfect something, like we keep working and keep critiquing and keep fixing it, but sometimes, like, why though? Like, that didn't was great as is. So I'm so glad that you said that, because like nowadays I think it's something that a lot of us are quite like kind of obsessed with. And like scrap the idea of what perfectionism means and what that should look like. So I'm so glad that you said that, especially sharing your story about the packaging. Like, that was really, I liked hearing that.
That's dope.
Like, imagine I threw it away because I was like, oh, not perfect. Then
and you want to be like everyone else.
Yeah. It's like, what is perfect
even mean? Yeah.
Like, and how who's deciding, like, perfect to me may not be perfect to someone else. So that's such a good point.
But this goes back to when sometimes we think this is what society wants, this is what they look and feel, so I have to do the same thing. No. Well, there's a reason why you're unique, you're different. Like, show that and showcase that. So I'm happy you alluded to that. That's a great example. And I actually want to just jump straight into it. Like, my other question regarding, I know you are in Sephora. Congrats, that's a huge deal to be.
Thank you.
I think practically all the stores, 500 stores in Sephora across the US and Canada. That's a huge deal. And let's just, obviously we're in Sephora as well. So yeah, we're buddies. So my question for you is that I know Sephora can be, like, they're great partners. They always give us, there's so many programs and market opportunities. They're always in the kitchen with us and helping with development. I guess my question for you is, how do you deal with newness and knowing that, you know what I mean, you're always having to develop and think of what is the next thing? I guess I'm trying to understand your creative flow. Do you feel like you always have to come up with new products, or do you feel like, I just want to continue to build what I've got and I'm happy, and I just want that to be like the thing that everyone is used to, rather than trying to feel like I have to bring something all the time?
Like hero products.
That's such a great question.
Yeah.
That is such a great question. So I think what people have to understand about our business, and Jackie, you mentioned this, is like we're creating hyper-performing products. Like we're creating products that really, really work. They're for specific skin conditions, and you can't just throw anything up when you're doing stuff like that. And so, in the early days, I had seen other brands launching cool collaborations and like on a 3 to 6 week cycle of launching new products. And at first I was like, wow, I want to be like that. I want us to have products. I want us to continue to storytell every single month, with new products. But I realized that it becomes really expensive. It's really hard to actually storytell at that level every single time. The types of team resources, budget you would need for that is actually really difficult. And so I committed to, again, the storytelling that we were going to do, but I wanted to do it 2 to 3 times a year. So at Topicals, we launch products maybe 3 times a year, 3 to 4. If we're lucky, we get 4 in 1 a quarter. But really for us, it's about product efficacy and targeted solutions. We make sure that our products work on the lightest of skin tones to the darkest of skin tones. Super imperative for us. The second is that we're storytelling. How are we telling the story? And Jackie, again, you mentioned this around the names, right? The big point of why we named them things like Faded and like Butter and High Roller is because in communities of color, we've been typically locked out of academia. And so I wanted to make sure that science was accessible to people who look like us versus it feeling scary or feeling like we were at the doctor's office when we were using a product. And so storytelling is a big part of that. If you notice, none of our campaigns, although they feature people with visible skin conditions, they're not about the skin condition. They're typically about, High Roller was about casino nights, because the product was called High Roller. We did a Faded campaign in December with a ton of rappers like Maya the Dawn and Young Baby Tate, because we wanted to talk about this idea of having under eye bags and using a product like Faded because you've been running the game for like the last year. We talk about things that feel a lot more present versus super academic. And so that takes a lot of work to do the casting, to do the branding, the storytelling, and then also to deliver a product that works every single time. So for us, it's 3 to 4 times a year. I try not to look left and right anymore about what other people are doing. I'm inspired by what people are doing, but I'd never kind of try to emulate or copy what other people do because that's not my race.
Yeah. And it's good to even give people insight with skincare products. It could take at least a year to even develop.
Yeah.
And I know customers, they mean well when they say, what else? They want to suggest products. They want to see new stuff. It's like, I love that you're giving ideas, but it's not as simple. And this is why I want to have this conversation, because like developing products and developing great products take time. It doesn't happen overnight. For us, candles is a bit less time frame. Could do it in 3-6 months, but with skincare products, you can't play games. You got to do rigorous testing.
Testing and and even the testing costs money too, like to run trials and stuff. Like it's not simple.
Have you had any situations where you've had a product, you thought it was good, and then you've had to maybe call it back, or you've had to do further developments which delay the launch?
So we have one launch that I have in mind that we wanted to launch last summer that, God willing, it'll come out next summer. But it was, again, that's 2 years on top of the 1 year we already did innovation on it. So it's basically a 3-year development cycle. And Faded, actually, when it first came out, did not smell. Or when it first got, actually, when we were doing the product development, we finally made it not smell. And then the first batch was the smelliest batch I've ever seen. Wow. But it was filled into the tube. So there was nothing that I could do, anything that I could do. And it's funny because then we parlayed it into this marketing thing where it was like, if your product's not smelling, they don't work, right? So it almost forces you to be creative when these bad situations happen, because I was like so devastated. I was like, we had worked this hard for this product. It's supposed to be our star product and it smells like rotten eggs. What are we gonna do?
So did you have to call it back?
No, we didn't call it back. We let it go because there was nothing wrong with the product other than the smell.
I think customers bring it up. What the customers say?
They still bring it up to this day. And we've like you said, we have done innovation over and over again to continue to perfect the product. But like sometimes good products just smell. And I think it's now actually been part of our story of like, Faded is a smelly product, but I know it's working because it smells in that way, right? So we've turned a negative into a positive But when I tell you, I was freaking out when we first launched. I was like, it's over. No one's going to like this company. No one's going to think that this company is good, that we make good product, because it literally smells like rotten eggs.
I didn't get that batch, so like maybe I just didn't notice, but I remember. Yeah, I remember like getting. I remember doing like a little unboxing on Instagram, and like people said it, and I was like, I don't smell what y'all smell.
You know, some people also just like, I think they have more sensitive noses than others, because we've really worked hard on reducing the smell. And to this day, I read our tweets sometimes, which I should probably stop doing, because people really try to hurt your feelings. But I read them. I was reading them yesterday, and people are just like, is it supposed to smell like that? Like, people just have like real visceral reactions to the smell, and other people are like, I don't smell anything. So
a little dramatic when it gets like skincare scents, because even sometimes like in a gloss, like I'll be like, oh my god, this smells so good, it smells like vanilla, and someone will be like, it literally makes me choke, and I'm like, girl, I cannot help you, like it's vanilla, like you just got to pray about it.
Yeah, literally just pray about it. No,
yeah, like some people are just hypersensitive, like you said.
People are also so used to skincare smelling like roses and flowers, because skincare used to actually be marketed by scent. You know, like it used to be like, oh, this face wash that smells energizing or smells X, Y, and Z. And so we flipped it on its head, where we care less about the smells, because honestly, scents can be irritating to your skin, and we've now focused on power and efficacy. And so you see the results, and at the end of the day, that's all I promised you. I never told you I was going to give you something that smelled like roses. I said I was going to give you products that work. So take it up with someone else, don't take it up with me.
But funny enough, people are willing to do what it takes. Like whenever you really want the result, it doesn't really matter. It's like for example, what's the drink you have, babes?
Kombucha.
Kombucha. I don't really like the taste of it, but because I know the benefits of it, I just don't drink. I'm like, cool.
I like it.
I love it.
She loves it. She loves it.
I love kombucha too.
I mean, look, people are injecting blood, PRP, into their face.
Like,
child, like you can do a little scent.
Scent. Yeah, you can do a little scent, right? So it is what it is. And like you said, I think, again, it's funny how these things that we're so scared that are going to be negative actually end up being really like something people know about your brand. So people already know. Smelly, faded.
Yeah.
And it's our best seller. So I don't, again, take it up with someone else, not me.
Period. So I was actually intrigued to learn that you attended UCLA and you got your BA in political science and entrepreneurship. Pre-med track, so you were on track to do pre-med at one point. Haven't we all? So can you share a little bit about that?
I am a first-gen Nigerian American woman. That is all you need to know.
But are you the firstborn daughter too?
I am the firstborn daughter.
Yeah. I'm praying for you.
Thank you. Please send all the prayers. I was in therapy this morning, and I had a great childhood, but it is just like, actually in therapy this morning, we were talking about this idea of like honor and respect, and how like in African households, like that is such a big thing. Like over anything, honor and respect, by working hard, by being a good child. Like, and I think that is what actually has made me who I am today, but it also made me do a lot of things that I didn't want to do, right? And I thought I wanted to be a dermatologist. I thought I wanted to be a doctor, and I'm thankful for that experience, because if I didn't understand the science, topicals may not exist. Like, I think so many of my experiences, so many of my intersections had to be what they had to be for this company to come to fruition. And so while I don't regret the things that I've had to do, I do think that we could have slowed it down, because I was also on scholarship running track at UCLA while I was pre-med, while I was doing all the things. So it was tough.
Yeah.
It's hard being an athlete in college and pre-med at that. So, but I like how you mentioned it helped with the experience of being the brand founder now, because surely the experiences and some of the education you learned have helped you with like probably understanding ingredients and products and stuff like that. And entrepreneurship, being able to learn that in college, like, of course, like I'm sure it's probably also a win. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it's so funny, because in the time when you're going through whatever it is and it feels really hard, you're like, this is terrible, this is awful. But hindsight is always 20/20 vision, and you're like, oh, I get why I went through those things, which is why now whenever things kind of get a little shaky for me, I never like, I try my best not to get too upset, because I'm like, that is just another kind of pathway for where I'm supposed to be going. And it never makes sense today, but it always makes sense like in the past, in the future. And so for me, that's how I've thought about that full experience. And again, had I not gone to UCLA, I wouldn't have started my first brand that I worked on, which is Shea Girl, in partnership with Shea Moisture. So this is not my first rodeo. But when I was 19, I got the honor, honestly, to work alongside one of my really good friends, Rochelle Dennis, at her father's company, Shea Moisture. She was an athlete. She did gymnastics while I run track at UCLA, and we were roommates. And she one day was just telling me about her dad and building the businesses, and said, I've always wanted to build one for young women. Like, do you want to do it with me? And I was like, girl, what do I know about creams, lotions, and and she was like, my dad will mentor us. And it was honestly the best experience I could have had.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, there's no way I would have learned anything about managing, your profit and loss statement, community commerce, which is giving back, or grassroots marketing, had I not worked at Shea Moisture for those 2 years. And so UCLA also brought me that, right? And so at the end of the day, I'm grateful for every experience I went through, because it produced, Topicals.
Amazing.
That's awesome.
And one huge achievement that you've done is raise money multiple times. And as you know, as a Black founder, Black woman, it's tough. Last year, 200 billion was given by VCs and stuff, and less than 2% allocated to women, people of color. So the fact that you've done it is just tremendous, and an inspiration to many people that are trying to go down that journey. What advice would you give to any of people that are trying to currently raise, and how, in fact, maybe even tell us some of your challenges, because you obviously clearly went through challenges, and how you overcame that to raise at the end? What do you think you did differently that made you get to the end of the finish line?
Yeah, I think people see you now and they see the headlines of she raised all this money. But from 2018, when I graduated college, to 2020, when I launched Topicals, I was on the road fundraising. Fundraising for most people is 3 months, 6 months at most. Mine was 2 years. 2 years of trying to get investors to understand why it was important to invest in this business, why skin of color was important, and why there was a need, why skin conditions were so rampant in the United States and people had lack of access to healthcare. But all the things did not make sense to a lot of investors, because they were so used to seeing a different type of founder show up, or a different type of business. And so it took me the 2 years, but we finally raised the first 2.6 million that I raised in 2020. And then I mentioned in last year in January, we did a bridge round, which we raised 2.2 million. And then in October of last year, we raised 10 million, bringing our total funding to about 15 million. And so very, very interesting and long route, but you got.
Well, I'm glad you gave that context as well, because as you said, some people think it's overnight, and you've been putting in the work. And was it pre-launch before you actually launched the business that you raised the first round? So you managed to raise before you actually first round? Okay, cool.
Which is probably the hardest way to do it, to be quite honest.
Yeah, that is the hard.
Much better to raise it after you've shown some traction, but also sometimes you launch and it doesn't go the way you want to, and then you have to paint this picture, in investors' mind of okay, your cash is going to be I'm going to somehow turn this around. So it has its pros and cons.
It can, and I just lost my trail because I had a question on top of the raise.
Well, while you think, I just want to mention that I always think it's so funny having the conversation about Black founders and fundraising, because it's ironic that when we're fundraising, we always have to prove that it's worth it to them, whereas non-Black founders can just be invested in based on the potential. And these are two completely different types of conversations, and also opportunities that a lot of times aren't afforded to us, because you have to literally prove it to them. And not a lot of other non-Black founders aren't necessarily dealt that same card, which is, how many billion was the beauty industry worth? 200 billion and only, or fundraising, you said?
No, I'm saying 200 billion last year was raised, invested, and only 2%.
$200 billion.
200 billion.
Yeah.
And only 2% of that went to Black founders sounds intentional to me.
Yeah, very much so.
Very intentional, we're
less
gatekeeping, and we're, because 2% is with the amount of new businesses that pop up all the time, you can't tell me you either aren't familiarizing yourself with them, or you're purposely being nope, not interested, don't care, innovative.
But to your point, more scrutiny, someone can, another counterpart.
Yeah.
And because of who they know, they connect.
Yeah.
Right.
they will just get the investments. Like, okay, you went to this school, you know this person, okay, you're good. That's good.
It's a trust game, right? So if I trust you, then I'm going to give you the money. And when you don't already know people who look like us, like, and then I don't go to the same school as you, it's like there's just so many layers that would make you fearful. And I used to always say that when you're young and non-Black, people see you as visionary, right? This like young kid trying to go after it. But when you're young, Black, and a woman, people see you as like, that might be a little risky. I'm just not sure. She may be inexperienced, but like, I probably have more credentials than the non-Black founder you were going to fund anyway. So, I mean, that's why I tell people, Dennis, you asked me a little bit earlier about what advice or what thing I live by when I'm thinking about fundraising. And I think you have to raise with the plan to execute, and execute like you'll never raise again, because they may never give you money again, to be frank. They barely gave it to you this time, so they may not give it to you the next time. And I think tides are changing and things, people are getting, you know, more familiar with Black businesses, seeing, you know, Myel Organics, you know, Shea Moisture, these brands exit for hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars. But again, what happens when that dries up? Like, are people going to still want to invest in Black founders?
Yeah, and we're seeing it with the pandemic and all that stuff. Things are getting tougher now. You're not getting the same valuations that you could get a few years ago. It's like, and there's more scrutiny. So it's getting tougher and tougher. I'm hopeful that, you know, the future is bright for founders. So yeah, but this was great. This was amazing. This was great chatting to you and really getting to know your journey. We have so many other questions, but I know we're short for time, but I appreciate you coming on this and chatting to us. We're going to do a quick fire. We called it a quick fire.
Rapid fire.
Rapid questions, where we're going to ask you questions in 1 minute. So Iris is going to time in the background and you should just answer it one word. Or one sentence.
Okay, right? Cool.
Quick sentence, so you can answer as many questions as you can. So you answer.
All right.
Go for it.
First question, what was your first hire?
Creative director.
That's a good one. Average daily sleep?
8 hours.
Period.
Okay, good.
And that's good for your skin too.
Yes, you see it.
Fave entrepreneur?
Ooh, Emma Grede.
Ooh, good one.
Yeah.
Best business advice?
You don't have to be everything to everyone, but you have to be everything to one.
Ooh, I like that.
What was your longest meeting?
How many hours?
3 hours. When we first started, we used to just do meetings for longer. We had to cut it. We were like, okay, that's enough. Our meetings are now an hour at max, but we used to be 3 hours.
Bad habit?
I feel like I'm on social media too much. But it's like, I have to for work, but it's like, I constantly find myself jump into the app. I'm like, jump to the Bible app, jump to the book app. Like,
startup myth?
Balance. I'm sorry, it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I wish. Yeah,
there are boundaries, but there's no balance.
That's it.
Okay, that's it. Okay,
oh,
cool.
Okay.
But I actually want to leave with what are you most proud of? Like, look back at your journey. What are you most proud of?
I'm proud of the fact that we've donated $100,000 to mental health organizations. I think we don't think too much about mental health as it relates to beauty, because so many people make us feel like beauty is superficial, but what you look like determines like who you are. You know, representation determines who you think you can be. And for us, we found that people with chronic skin conditions are 2 to 6 times more likely to experience depression and anxiety. And so we wanted to build some way to give back to our community. We didn't just want to provide you a product that made you feel better externally. We also wanted to create resources and give back to the people who are doing the work on the ground around mental health, because there's a deep connection between skin health and mental health.
Very, very well said. That's awesome.
Yeah, great way to end.
Yeah, I know. Thank you so much for taking the time, Olamide. It was so wonderful getting to know you and having you on the platform. I think everyone's going to really enjoy this.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So where can we find Topicals?
Oh, yes.
We can find Topicals at Topicals on all socials and mytopicals.com.
Cool. And then people can follow you in your journey. What's your social at?
So it's Olamide Olowe on all socials as well.
Okay, cool.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much.